Hey, what's up, guys? This is Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. Happy Tip Tuesday. Today I'm going to address one of our listener/inner circle questions as I do on Tuesday. So this question was from a dad. He says, hey man, can you help me figure out why I'm not gaining muscle? And well, there's a bunch of reasons that are possible that you're not gaining muscle. So hopefully one of these things resonates with you and helps you out. So the first thing that I look at if somebody's not gaining muscle is, especially for dads, so that's my primary demographic, not necessarily just dads, but parents in general. I like to look at whether or not there are any impediments to your free testosterone. And free testosterone is something that people throw around a lot out in the world right now, like the testosterone replacement therapy industry is really intense, and the fitness industry right now really likes to talk about testosterone, but really there's not a lot of magic to it. Okay, there's a few things that really affect a guy's testosterone. If you're trying to gain muscle, you need it. First of all, testosterone is nice and anabolic to muscle. That means it helps you grow it, and as testosterone decreases over your lifespan, so generally does lean body mass as well. But it's also catabolic to fat tissue, which is really nice. So having testosterone on your body supports muscle and decreases fat, and who doesn't want that, right? So one of the things that really affects testosterone for dads is whether or not you have any young children in the house. That's something I talk about a lot with Defining Dad Bod. So if they did this really interesting study in the Philippines where they did over 1,000 testosterone tests on dads just before having a baby and just after having a baby, and then they followed these guys for a few years to see what happened with their testosterone. Your testosterone might be here when the newborn is born, and then it drops somewhere between 60 and 80% of the original level just after the newborn's born. And if you're a guy listening to this and you have young kids in the house, as far as this study was concerned, they didn't try any interventions or anything. They were just checking testosterone. As far as the study was concerned, your testosterone didn't bounce back to your age expected level until your youngest child was 4 years old. So that's a pretty big deal. And I try to cover that testosterone interventions in Overcoming Obesity Part 3 on the Defining Dad Bod podcast. It's talking about getting rid of man boobs and beer bellies. And so we're talking about testosterone in that episode, and the goal of it is, hey, you're not going to change the biological adaptation that having a newborn or young children in the house brings about with regard to your testosterone. But there are a lot of things that you can stop doing nutritionally and start doing lifestyle-wise that can be really powerful for you. So to this dad, if you got young children in the house, you're going to notice it's much harder to gain muscle than it was before you had young children in the house. That's just how it is. I've got a 4-year-old and I've got a 6-month-old, so I feel you, brother. I feel you. Alex 5 years ago could put on muscle like a boss compared to Alex at the moment, so I'm with you on that one. But some things that you can be doing that would really shoot your muscle growth in the foot with regard to testosterone. First, maybe you're training wrong. Many guys I've worked with from an exercise standpoint are doing the same workouts they were doing back in high school or college athletics. They're trying to do rope slams and doing 3 sets of 10 repetitions of everything, and they're doing the same exercises and whatnot. And it's very possible that, one, you probably need some periodization in your life, some deloading, and then some conditioning, and then some athletic peak performance and whatnot. And 2, it's very possible that sometimes you're either going too heavy or going too light. It's one of the two. But with regard to exercise adaptations, to grow muscle, you have to hit both gambits. You have to hit type 1 muscle fibers. Those are your endurance muscle fibers. They're the ones that create the foundation of eccentric strength so that you can go heavy for your concentric strength movements, like bench press. If you can't do 20 to 25 bench presses with 50% of your 1 rep max, then you're lacking some type 1 muscle fibers, or at least lacking some conditioning with regard to your type 1 muscle fibers. And so when you get on the bench and you go to do your heavier weights, you're not going to be able to perform as well. You're not going to be able to perform the same volume or the same intensities required in order to create some hypertrophy. Now, type 1 muscle fibers, they don't increase your muscle size very much. They're long, lean fibers, and so you can exercise the heck out of the 20 repetition range. You're not going to grow a lot of muscle, not very much, unless you're deconditioned. But what that does is it sets you up for success in the later phases of training, like hypertrophy and strength training. And so when you start going heavier and doing more sets and doing less repetitions, then what happens is your capacity to move weight goes up. And so if I'm trying to grow my chest, then the endurance phase is required. I need, 4 to 6 weeks of high rep, low weight work in order to really condition those type 1 muscle fibers. And then I can get into some of the more type 2 muscle fiber stuff that's going to increase the cross-sectional area of the muscle tissue. So it's very possible that if you're having trouble gaining muscle, you're training wrong. You're not making the best use of the adaptations that you could. So we've got possible testosterone issues, we've got possible training issues, then we've also got some nutritional issues. I mean, what are you doing to shoot your muscle growth in the foot nutritionally speaking? Are you consuming alcohol on a regular basis? Are you drinking too much caffeine? Both of those two things can be catabolic to your muscle growth, right? And then you could also be a little bit better about your carbohydrate intake with regard to before and after workouts, right? I like to joke pretty often on the show that leg day is carrot cake day. If I want to enjoy some carrot cake, I generally try to shift that around leg day. Why do I do that? Well, leg day is very, very large muscle groups working very hard, depleting glycogen. And so I can get a nice little insulin boost by post-workout by consuming something high in sugar or high in easily digestible carbohydrates, right? I'm not saying that you need to have carrot cake on leg day to grow muscle. What I'm saying is if you're not growing muscle like you would like to, maybe you need to get a little smarter about your carbohydrate intake. Now, there's a lot of studies out there about how nutrient timing is not really that important comparatively, and I agree wholeheartedly. I'm just trying to give this guy some ideas with regard to growing muscle that maybe might help him out. The biggest thing that I find with guys who are having a hard time growing muscle is sleep. Man, I had a bodybuilder I used to work with, and this guy was a massive guy, and he was actually one of those guys who was doing it right. Like, he wasn't pumping steroids. The dude trained really hard on a regular basis, but was training well for his body. His joints didn't hurt all the time. He had great HDL and LDL cholesterol. He didn't cut for very long periods of time. He was, in my mind, he was one of the healthiest bodybuilders I'd ever met. And he used to say that the best muscle gaining supplement is sleep. The best muscle gaining supplement is sleep. What was he saying? He was saying that you're going to have a really hard time growing any muscle tissue, no matter how hard you train or how well you eat, if you don't give your body enough time to recover. So exercise creates adaptations at the cellular level. But sleep allows your body to rebuild the tissues and respond positively to those adaptations. So if you're having trouble growing muscle, we've talked about testosterone in relation to young kids. Sorry, it's windy out here, guys. We've talked about testosterone. We've talked about exercise program design. We've talked a little bit about nutrition here, and then sleep. Man, huge deal. William N. says, coffee, alcohol, and lack of sleep. That's part of being a father. Amen, dude. I'm 100% with you on that. Yep. The question is, can we moderate all of those things to make the best use of our fatherhood and muscle, right? So, I had a 5-month-old. Well, I had a 5-month-old. We had a baby 5 months ago. And I actually did a show called How to Work Out While Sleep Deprived, because I know that as a parent, you're not going to get the perfect amount of sleep with a young baby in the house, unless you just, my wife and I would joke, like, we're going to rent a hotel room and you're going to go sleep and then we'll trade, at least we get one night of good sleep once a week or something. We didn't do that. But the question is, could you be working out more intelligently to make the best use of your under-recovered state? And so if that's interesting to you, I think that's episode 9 on the show, How to Work Out While Sleep Deprived. And the same thing goes for alcohol. Alcohol will increase your serotonin, so it makes you feel better while your testosterone's low. So a lot of guys crave bourbon and beer and stuff. And then, when you're lacking sleep, you rely on coffee to grow it. And so, no, you're not going to have the most muscle you can possibly have while you have young kids in the house. That's just par for the course. The question is, could you do any better than what you're doing right now? And for some guys, that answer is no. Like, you're just not going to do any better than you are right now. And that's fine, but don't get mad because you're having a hard time gaining muscle. It's just part of the package at the moment. But for some guys, they don't know that. They don't know that they could cut from 2 bourbons a night to 1 bourbon a night, and it would help them grow muscle. They don't know that, if they could take a nap over their lunch break in the parking lot for 30 minutes, then that actually might help them with their muscle growth goals. They don't know that rather than trying to bust their butt with HIIT workouts at the gym and going for more cardio runs to decrease their fat, that they would do a better job with 30-minute workouts of relatively high weight, relatively high volume, with lots and lots of rest. You'll do much better when your cortisol's high that way, gaining muscle tissue, than if you try to go really hard for 60 to 90 minutes while you're sleep deprived. All that high intensity stuff, the rope slams and kettlebell swings, save that for when you're well rested, man. You're not getting anywhere with that plyometric endurance garbage, at least if muscle growth's your goal. So John says, do you consume as much protein on rest days as hard gym days? That's a good question, John. It depends on my phase. So if I'm in the athleticism phase, if I'm in the hypertrophy phase, then yes, I'm consuming a significant amount of protein on whether I'm training or not. The recovery from that is pretty intense. But if you're in a foundations phase or an endurance phase where your intensity is not nearly as high and it's just volume, then no, you don't need nearly as much protein either on training days or rest days. The recovery is not as intense. I like to tell my clients, if they're sore on their recovery day, that's a good indication that they need just as much protein recovering as they do training. So, good question. William says, I hit the gym 3 to 4 times a week. I also have protein shakes. Rad 140 helped a lot. I added 7 pounds of muscle mass, toned up, and building muscle can be done. You just have to push yourself. You have to want it. 3 kids, 9, 7, and 5. Hey man, way to keep up the defining dad bod thing and putting in the work. That's great. And I hope that your wife and kids appreciate your example. So anyway, that being said, the last thing I was going to say about muscle growth is there is a possibility, and the possibility is this, that you have, this might not be everybody, in fact, very few people I think are in this category, but you might have exhausted your genetic potential for muscle growth. There is an enzyme that's genetically determined called myostatin, and myostatin's job is to make sure that you don't grow more muscle than your body can handle, genetically speaking. And so that enzyme, if you're interested in this sort of thing, go to, you can Google something called a Belgian blue, Belgian blue. It's a kind of cow. It's a breed of cattle. They have a deletion in their myostatin gene, which means that they don't have any of it. And so these cows look super buff. But cows don't work out. You and I both know that. They don't do lat pull downs or bent over rows or deadlifts. Cows are just cows, and they eat and they do what they do. But because they don't have any myostatin, they grow muscle like a boss. There's just muscle all over these things. And so anyway, that being said, I have met a few guys that when I work with them, it's pretty apparent to me that, testosterone looks good, their sleep's doing great, they're eating pretty well. They've almost maxed out their genetic potential from a muscle growth perspective. And at that point, the question is, you can use insulin to override myostatin in the short term. And if that's your goal, great, we can do that for a little bit. But then the question has to become, what are the other goals? Is it important that you have muscles coming out of your ears? Or are you looking for strength, investments in your health in the future? Maybe there's some events we need to be training for, that sort of thing. And so I work with guys to help them develop a more complete understanding of their health and fitness goals, because muscle growth is important. Don't get me wrong. You need to grow muscle to, if anything else, to invest in the future. We're all fighting the clock, and lean body mass is going to go down. That's just how aging works. But the more we can maintain that lean body mass, the better we can explore those limits of our genetic potential, the better we're going to age, the more independent we're going to be, the less injuries we're going to have. Body composition is going to be positive. There are very few negatives to having as much muscle as your body will allow you to have in a healthy way. But that also being said, muscle growth shouldn't be the end of your goals, right? Muscle growth is good, but it's not the end all be all. And so anyway, I appreciate you guys joining me here for Tip Tuesday. Thanks for the question. I'll be live next week on another Tip Tuesday talking about some other questions that people bring out. And if the testosterone conversation, the nutrition, the exercise, the lifestyle around testosterone is interesting to you, I'd also invite you to register for our Mastermind. So we've got our Hormone Pyramid Mastermind going down the first full week of August, and registrations are still open for that. The early bird ended yesterday, but it's still pretty affordable. It's $60 for 4 weeks. So I hope that is interesting to you. We have 1 day a week we'll be getting on Zoom live, so we'll be going through insulin, cortisol, then testosterone, and then thyroid, and we'll be addressing a lot of the things a lot more fully, obviously, than what I did here, but we'll be addressing a lot of the things that I just spoke about, because primarily when we're talking about hormone modulation and getting our metabolism to work for us rather than against us, we're trying to create an atmosphere in our body that is pro-lean body mass and anti-excessive fat gain, and both of those generally result in muscle growth and fat loss, so improved body composition. Anyway, I'm excited for the people who have registered so far, and if that's interesting to you, I will post that in the link here, the comments below. Thanks for joining me on Tip Tuesday, guys. This has been Alex Van Houten with Defining Dad Bod. Until next time, kick butt, take names.